3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Strong Collectors Comics. My name is Jordan, and today we're going to be talking about an upcoming comic line from DC, and that is DC Absolute, or the Absolute Universe. Now, I've been hearing about this for a while. I had the inside scoop a couple months ago, to be honest. Dakota was a bit hesitant to ever talk about it, so you can blame him for the fact that you're just now hearing about it. But that is what we're going to be talking about today, because we have been getting some more information from San Diego Comic-Con as to what this series is actually going to be. So we have announced so far 4 series. One is going to be Batman, and that is going to be written by Scott Snyder. We're also going to be having Superman from Jason Aaron, Wonder Woman from Kelly Thompson, and most recently we heard about a Flash series, and that is going to be written by a personal favorite of mine, Jeff Lemire. And when I first heard about DC Absolute, it seemed to be like this was sort of their version of Marvel's Ultimate Universe, where you have reimaginings of pretty standard classic characters that we've had around for decades and bringing them into a modern context, a bit more streamlined. So it looks like we're going to have some significant updates to the DC characters that we see in DC Absolute. DC themselves had stated, as a quote, "These heroes are going to have fewer advantages while facing greater opposition than ever before." And the vibe from the art, from some of the statements we've heard, seems to be that these universes will be a bit darker, or at least somewhat gritty. And I think there's a hesitation that people have with that just because of the Snyderverse movies, the Injustice games, sometimes putting the DC characters that are a bit more hopeful, optimistic in some of these dark and bleak situations. I understand people's frustration with that, to always put DC characters in that light in some contexts. However, I could see this being different in the sense of they've stated they want to stay true to the core of the characters and just put them in new and somewhat difficult circumstances, but in a modern context, which I think could result in some interesting storytelling. A good example of this is going to be Batman, who we have the most details about his series. He's not a millionaire or a billionaire, but he's going to be a civil engineer, construction worker, so a bit more of a blue-collar Batman. He's not going to have a mansion, so he's not going to have all those resources that Batman would normally have. He's also super jacked. This is pretty buff, burly Batman. I think he gives the Dark Knight Returns Batman a run for his money. Alfred is going to be an MI6 agent who comes to town, and he's hunting somebody, and he was never going to be Batman's butler in this world. I'm assuming that Batman is still going to be Bruce Wayne, but we haven't even, I don't think, had that confirmed. Black Mask was teased as a bad guy, and we had some art of him in a pretty creepy looking mask, which I think actually looks kind of cool. In the early 2000s, Darren Aronofsky had been working on a Batman movie that was going to be somewhat similar to this. I think Bruce Wayne was not going to have his resources, the mansion. He was teaming up with Alfred, who's like a car mechanic. So really kind of stripping Batman down to the basics, which I do think could be a pretty interesting story. So I could see this Batman one being cool, especially with Scott Snyder involved. We don't have nearly as much on Superman. The only confirmed details we have, Krypton will explode. So you got to have that in a Superman story. And we've also heard that this Superman is not going to have a home or family or a lot of the support that you typically see in a Superman story. So I could see that bringing some interesting stuff. And then Wonder Woman is not going to have been raised on Themyscira with the Amazonians, but instead was raised in the underworld. And I think Dakota's going to like this. She rides a skeleton Pegasus. As far as the Flash goes, we only have an art tease for him, but he looks like he's going to be a bit more tormented by the Speed Force. Not sure exactly how to interpret that image, but it seems he's definitely a little stressed out about this. So, again, all of these are kind of different, more unique takes on these characters that we're not necessarily used to seeing. And this is all going to kick off in the DC All-In Special #1, and that's going to be in October. And that will set the stage for the Absolute DC universe. From a description that we've heard in this, Darkseid is going to come to Earth in the main universe, and somehow that is a catalyst for what sounds like the multiverse being recreated, which it's always kind of hard to tell because I feel like there's a lot of multiverses that show up, get erased, come back in, but that kind of seems to be the springboard for this story. And overall, I'd say I'm pretty excited. I have been loving the new Ultimate Spider-Man by Jonathan Hickman, and I hope it has those vibes of kind of giving us new takes on these characters that we're pretty familiar with without being, I'd say, bogged down by all the continuity or tie-ins or past years of what's going on. I think it could be a bit familiar, but also fresh at the same time. And I think that's a difficult balance to strike with comic fans. I've always felt like DC books have been less accessible in that sense with all the continuity and stuff. So I could see this going really well for them, depending on how they do it. Hopefully, DC doesn't let it get confusing or convoluted, I guess, and kind of keep it. I hope that it stays as its own thing. I'm sure they'll cross over in some kind of an event, at least within that universe. Personally, though, I'm hoping that it stays as its own universe. It doesn't necessarily have to tie back into the larger DC world. But I guess we'll see how that all plays out. So let us know below how you're feeling about DC Absolute. Are there any books that you're excited about? Do you think this is a good direction for them to be going? Please let us know. We always love to hear what your thoughts are. Be liking, sharing, and subscribing. And until next time, stay strong.